All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up our review for Unit 1, the Foundations period, with examining the first civilizations that were developed during this time period. So, about 5,000 years ago, we see the rise of the first civilizations, and it just so happens to be the same places where the Neolithic Revolution first occurred. So, what makes a civilization? Number one, you need to have a large society. You need to have a powerful state that is a government. You need to have agricultural surplus. You need to have specialization of labor. You need to have cities developed. You need to have bureaucracies, that's government institutions. You need to have armies and religious organizations or hierarchies or um, organization. You need to have a clearly stratified social hierarchy. That means a division between upper, lower, and middle class people. And you also need to have some type of long distance trading. So if you have most of these, then congratulations, you are a civilization. So, what are the first civilizations we're going to look at? Number one, Mesopotamia, right there, right? This is going to be one of the four river valley civilizations, the Tigris and Euphrates River. We're going to see the Nile River in Egypt, right? We're going to see the Indus River in India and the Indus Valley civilization. And up here in China, we see the Huang River, the Yellow River. All right, we see the first civilization in China right there. Now, just because these are the first four civilizations and they are the river valley civilizations, it doesn't mean you need to be next to a river to have a civilization. Main examples of this would be the Americas civilizations, where we have the Olmecs in Mesoamerica up here, right? That's in Mexico and Central America, and of course the Chavin down here in the Andes mountains of South America. All right, so these are the river valley civilizations. Mesopotamia is going to be the first one. It's in modern day. There you go, right? That's Mesopotamia. Basically, Mesopotamia is in the Middle East. The Middle East includes places like Iraq and Syria and Israel and Lebanon. Mesopotamia originally was organized into city-states. For a long period of time of war and conflict, they were united into a kingdom. And these regional kingdoms includes like the Sumerians and Babylonians and Assyrians, right? These are the different people that lived in Mesopotamia over different periods of time. Mesopotamia is flat with no natural borders, so they don't have rivers, so they don't have lakes or oceans or mountains to kind of have a natural defense, natural border, which means anyone can come in and take over, right? So this is Mesopotamia, right? The Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, right? These are all different people that ruled this area over different periods of time, and eventually it will grow into a empire under the Assyrians. The Egyptians in the Nile River, that's in North Africa or in the Middle East or Egypt, they did have natural borders because they were surrounded by deserts and mountains and seas, which means that they had less warfare, so they were more stable and they were organized into kingdoms, right? Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms. Those are the three major eras ruled by the pharaohs. So what we see in Egypt is we see a strong government that is very, very stable. There's a lot more peace and stability, a lot less warfare, because Egypt is kind of like isolated. Mohenjo Daro and Harappa, those are the two major city states of the Indus River Valley civilization. They're in South Asia, modern day India, and Pakistan. Right, so kind of right, remember they're over here. These people are going to be famous because of their massive, awesome cities of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, with a lot of urban planning like sewers and granaries and baths. And even though we don't know exactly why this collapsed, we know that they probably had some type of climate change and were probably invaded by a group of people known as the Aryans, and that eventually led to their decline. In China, We see the birth of the first of many dynasties called the Shang dynasty. They're the originators. They ruled a small area around the Yellow River, and they're going to be the last of the river civilizations to form, right? Of the four river valley civilizations. The Shang dynasty will eventually be conquered by a new dynasty. Remember, dynasty is a family of rulers, right? Where the power is passed down from one member of the family to the next, to the next, to the next. So the Shang will be replaced by the Zhao dynasty, right? And that's the beginnings of that Chinese dynasty song that you need to be memorizing Shang Zhao, right? The Zhao, they're going to create the mandate of heaven, which is going to be continuity in Chinese history from time period one all the way to time period six, right? Where the the Zhao are going to claim that they have the mandate of heaven, that the gods have chosen them to be the rulers of China, and that the gods have chosen the Zhao instead of the Shang, and that's why the Shang have been replaced. The Shang also used oracle bones. That's one of those famous cultural qualities of theirs. Remember, they would write stuff on the bones and they would light them on fire. And then, based on what what the priests would decipher, it's kind of like trying to figure out what the gods wanted them to do. All right, the Olmecs of Mesoamerica and Mexico, they're the mother culture, meaning that some of their culture is going to be passed down to other civilizations in the same area, like the Mayans and the Aztecs. Now, one main thing to remember about the Olmecs is that they have no domesticated animals. That means they don't have large beasts of burden like horses or cattle or camels, right? Animals that can do work. They don't have any of those in Mesoamerica. What they do have is a lot is people, so they will get people to drag these gigantic stones into their cities so they can carve them up, and these are the colossal Olmec heads made out of granite, made out of stone, and these are supposed to be symbolic of either their kings or more than likely their gods, right? The Chavin, they lived in South America, they lived in modern day Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. They are the mother culture, so that means that they're going to influence other places, other civilizations that came after them, like the Moche and the Incas, and they're going to be the first people of South America to domesticate the llamas and use them for food supply. All right. The states, remember, states is government. So we're going to say that the states are going to mobilize labor. They're going to control resources. They're going to tell the people what they need to do every day. Rulers are going to use religion and war to legitimize their power. So organized labor, that means you're going to get people to work together and say, okay, we need to have all these food, we need to build roads, we need to build walls, we need to build canals, and we need to defend our land, right? And that government is going to be the one telling the people what to do. Now, the rulers, they're going to claim to be divine, right? Like the Egyptian pharaoh is going to say he is God-like, or he is a god on earth, right? Some rulers are going to say that they're going to be divinely chosen, right? Like the mandate of heaven of China. In reality, however, most rulers became rulers because they had control of military, and the military would defeat anyone who said that they weren't in charge or that they were not the ruler. We see that the access to resources and technology can lead to the growth of a civilization or the decline of a civilization. States, governments, countries are always going to be fighting against each other, competing against each other for land and resources. So if you have a technological advantage, right, better weapons, better armor, right, then you can probably win in battle. And the main thing we see is with the development of iron metallurgy, right? All these river valley civilizations that we were talking about, they were part of the Bronze Age, right? But now we see the birth of the Iron Age. So if you have iron, iron is stronger than bronze. It lasts longer. It is more flexible. and it could withstand more work on it. So if you have iron, then you can defeat those who have bronze. So what happens, for example, the Shang dynasty of China, they used to have all the bronze. They controlled the bronze supply in China. And that means they were in charge for a long time because no one could compete against them. But then the Zhao, they start developing iron weapons and tools. And eventually they'll defeat the Shang dynasty using those iron weapons. There's a group called the Hittites, right? The Hittites came from what back then was called Anatolia. Nowadays we call it Turkey. And the Hittites, they conquered the Babylonians of Mesopotamia because the Babylonians were still using iron. They were using bronze, while the Hittites came in with iron swords and iron spears and iron arrows. The Hyksos, right? They are another people from Anatolia. They came into Egypt and they conquered the Egyptians because the Egyptians, they did not have war chariots, right? The Egyptians had animals, the Egyptians had chariots or wagons, but they didn't have war chariots, wheeled technology that allowed the Hyksos to conquer the Egyptians. Here we see one of those fancy war chariots, right? So the point is having access to new technology, new resources, right, will give your country the edge it needs to survive or to expand. Now we see a lot of fighting take place and in the process of empire building or state expansion. That means that as you grow, you have to conquer and fight and expand and kill people. So, for example, the Sumerian city states of Mesopotamia, right? They're going to be conquered by the Babylonian Empire, who are then going to be conquered by the Assyrian Empire. And then we also have the kingdoms of Egypt who are going to be conquered by the Persian Empire. So all these different states and empires, right, as they expand, as they grow, they will come into conflict and they'll become larger and larger and larger, incorporating multicultural people. Remember, that's the main difference between a kingdom and an empire, right? Everyone who lived in the kingdom of Egypt was an Egyptian. But in the Assyrian Empire, you had Babylonians, you had Egyptians, you had Sumerians, you had Assyrians, all living next to each other, right? One big, happy, dysfunctional family. Now, pastoralists, they would continue to, raise their animals, but they're going to work a lot in trade, right? Because pastoralists are naturally on the move, so they're going to be moving from point A to point B. So what they start doing is that they start transporting goods from point A to point B. They're going to pack their animals with weapons or tools or clothing or whatever, right? And they're going to go from one city to another city, from one agrarian civilization to another agrarian civilization, right? And they're going to introduce these new weapons, new ideas, new technologies from point A to point B, right? So famous examples include the use of the compound bow and iron weapons, new modes of transportation. Like the first people who used to ride horseback, they were Central Asian nomadic people. Right? They had the stirrup that allowed them to ride the horse using their legs, right? Using their feet. Early civilizations, we see that they're going to have monumental architecture and urban planning. Monumental architecture is you build stuff to show off. Famous examples include the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the Egyptian pyramids, right? You don't really need them, but you build them to show off, right? To show the power of the government, to show the cultural unity of the people, because everyone is in awe when they look at the temples or the pyramids. Now, urban planning, that means you make your city look nicer, right? The easiest ways, of course, is walls and streets and roads, right? The more fancy ways, things like sewage systems, like the Indus Valley would have water systems, like waters and parks and fountains, right? So these early civilizations, their capitals, their major cities are going to have a lot of these urban planning elements. Now, what we see is also that the upper class, the political leaders, the religious leaders, They're going to promote the arts. They're going to promote artisanship. They're going to promote people to build and decorate and draw and make things look nice, right? So these paintings and drawings, whether they're being drawn on temple walls or carved into temple walls or palaces, right? They're gonna pay artisans to make this stuff, to make their city, make the temple look nice, right? To craft statues for the kings and the pharaohs and the emperors. We also see record keeping for the first time develop, right? And different forms of record keeping develop in different places, like the Mesopotamian cuneiform, or the Egyptians hieroglyphs, or the Chinese pictographs, Phoenician alphabets, right? Later on, we see the Incan quipu. So the point is that you need to have some type of record keeping because your society gets larger and larger. You need to keep track of who is producing what, who is paying which taxes, right? How big your cities are, how big your population is. All of this is information you need to keep track of. So you need a record keeping system, right? And the first one, of course, is the cuneiform by the Sumerians of Mesopotamia. Now, as your cities and your states and your countries get larger and larger and more complex, you also need to have laws. You need to keep people under control. You need to keep people in check. So what we see is the development of legal codes. That means writing the laws down and publishing those laws, printing those laws, writing those laws in every part of your empire so that everyone knows what they are, so that the local rulers, the local government officials know how to enforce the laws and what the punishments are for breaking those laws. And the first known written legal system in the world is that of the Code of Hammurabi, right? A Babylonian king in Mesopotamia. There we see him right there. And his laws are very, very strict because it was believed that you need strict laws to keep people under control. Now, during this time, we see new religions take hold. And these religions are going to, or the practices, the beliefs of these religions are going to continue and expand later on in future time periods, like time period 2 and 3. Right, we see the Aryan Vedic religion in South Asia, where the Aryans were nomadic people that migrated into India, right? They kind of took over where the Indus Valley used to be, and they're going to bring in the Vedic religion with different, which will develop eventually into Hinduism. We see the first monotheistic religion, which is Hebrew or, Judaism, develop in the Middle East during this time, right? Even though it's a tiny, tiny, tiny religion, right? We'll see it grow and expand, and we'll see it influence other major monotheistic religions like Christianity and later on Islam. Zoroastrianism, we see that develop during this time in Persia and will kind of grow and expand later on in the next time period. Ancestral veneration in China, right? Praying to your ancestors, we see that's going to be continuity in China all the way into the 20th century. And finally, bloodletting or human sacrifice, as is more commonly known, we see that occur in Mesoamerica with the Olmecs, and it will kind of continue later on with the Mayans and the Aztecs. So a lot of the religious beliefs, right, primarily Hinduism and Judaism, they will begin in this time period and they will expand and grow more popular in the future. Now, trade will also expand during this time, and trade will allow people to, or civilizations to exchange goods and ideas and technology. So originally, trade was local, meaning that within the same city or from one city to the next, and there'll be regional. That means that North Africa is trading with North Africa, the Middle East is trading with the Middle East, South Asia is trading with South Asia. That's regional. And then there's trans-regional or inter-regional or long distance trade, right? So we see Egypt, they're going to trade with Nubia. Nubia is in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're going to trade from North Africa to sub-Saharan Africa. We're going to see Mesopotamia and the Middle East trade with Indus valleys in South Asia, right? So here we see some of those trade networks we're talking about. Mesopotamia and the Middle East. They're going to be trading all the way with Indus Valley in South Asia. The Egyptians up here in North Africa, they're going to trade with Nubia all the way in sub-Saharan Africa down here. On this map, will be somewhere around here. We also see that social hierarchy, gender hierarchy will develop during this time. So, for example, we see the caste system form in India, and this is based off of the Vedic religion, also known as the Hindu religion. The idea that you're born into a caste and you cannot move up in society, you cannot move up, you're forced to be there, and it is based on your past deeds, right? On your karma from a previous life. So if you did good in the previous life, you'd have good karma, then you will be rewarded with a higher status in the next lifetime. But if you did bad, then you would be dropped down in the caste system to a lower level. Upper class Mesopotamian women, we see that they were going to be veiled, right? And it began as a social practice to show off, right? That these women were so beautiful, so fancy, and so elite that they must cover themselves so that the common man can't look at them, right? They're better than the common people. And veiling, of course, will gain more and more popularity over time and eventually become tradition, and it'll become religious rules and religious laws of Islam. Lower class women, we see that lower class women, even though they have to, take care of the house because of patriarchy, we're also going to see that they must also, many times, to provide for the family, they have to work in public, working out in the fields or in the marketplace as well. All right, so we're going to stop here for our unit one. Thank you for listening and thank you for your patience.